All right, students, I want to demonstrate just a little bit about typography and text in Adobe Photoshop. I've got a mock-up of a potential book cover here, so I put a piece of my Photoshop work in the background. You can see I've got layered over the top of it my template guide, so I can kind of keep track of where my trim lines are in the safe zone. And remember that safe zone, that green line right here, I don't want any valuable visual or textual information going past that. I don't want something to accidentally get trimmed off. That red line is where the artwork will literally be trimmed at the end of the day when it becomes a book cover. So keep that in mind. And these dashed lines in the middle are just for the spine. Here again, that's just to remind you where the spine is going to be so I can insert some text there. So I'm going to turn that on and off as I go along, and you will too as you're designing. And many of you have been doing this already. So in the Layers palette, I am turning off the template guides for the time being. Now if you'll go to your tool, your text tool, it's over here on the vertical bar, and it's got the big serifed T. And anytime that you've got that, that means you can insert text. I'm going over here to the front, and in an approximate area, I'm going to click and drag where I want this title to be. Okay, and I don't really have a title of a book here, but I'm just going to say Heaven and Earth. Let's say that was the title of this, okay? When you type, it's going to default to whatever text someone has last used. You can look up in the property bar. This says Trajan Pro. Actually, not a bad choice. Bold, 24 point. Want it to be larger, I can go here and select a larger size. There's some issues here with the leading we'll talk about later. There's some other cool effects we can do on text up here too I'll talk about at some point. But I just wanted to get you started with thinking about how you will insert your text. We will certainly have text on the spine as well, but it's probably going to be different. Let me go select, I'm going to click off of that and go to my T, and I'm going to select another text box. And I'm going to say the same thing, Heaven and Earth. This time I want this to be a lot smaller because it's going to be on the spine, so I'm going to go up here and say something like 18 pixels. If I want to rotate this while it's selected, if I look over here in my Layers palette, you can see I've got Heaven and Earth here. That's the small one. By the way, I want to make that change. I'm going to say Heaven and Earth Spine. I just double click on the name there. And this is Heaven and Earth Front. That's just for my own information as I go along the way. And I'm going to call this one, while I'm doing this, I'm going to call it Background. You should get familiar with and used to the culture of naming all of your layers. This background is the original white background. I'll delete that eventually. All right. Now let's look at the text tool. I want to actually rotate this text, so make sure I'm on that layer, which is the one that said Spine. And I'm going to go to my Move tool because I could actually just drag that around, but I actually want to rotate that. So I'm going to go to Edit and Free Transform, tool that you've used a lot. You could pause this anytime if you need to back up, but we'll get those little nodules, which means it's selectable and you can move it. If you hold Shift down, it actually moves in 15-degree intervals and kind of snaps in place. So I just want it to be vertical. Like that. So now I can actually, I have to apply it, I can actually now just move this over to the spine. I'm not quite sure where my spine was, so let me go to my layer, template guides, turn them on, and I can see here that my dotted line is kind of like right in this area. I'm not sure where I would want it to be, but I kind of get a good starting point. I might want it to be a little bit larger. You can scale it just like you do images too. You can go Edit, Free Transform, and then scale that text up a little bit bigger. Okay, let me turn off the guide so that'll kind of get them out of the way. And there we go. Now Heaven and Earth, the cover is way out of where it needs to be. I need to get it further to the right, kind of out of the way here. The leading, I got to adjust the leading. So let me just do this. I'll show you how you change the font, how you change the spacing in between the letters, how you change the color, and that should get you started. Okay, so if you'll double click, like I've got Heaven on Earth front, I'm going to double click on it. And if you look for this tab up here, it should say character. If that's not showing, then go to your window and find character, just like that, and it should show. Mine's already showing, so I don't need to do that, but it just looks like that. And it may be a little icon with an A on it, but here's the font, here is the bold, everything that you saw on that property bar up there, it's over here. But it's got these two additional things, like this little icon right here, it says VA. This is for kerning or tracking, they call it, making the text closer to each other, the letters closer to each other. This is the line height or leading. I'm actually gonna, you can click here and make it bigger. Now watch what happens over here. It opened up bigger. Let me zoom out just a little bit so we can see them both together. But Heaven and Earth, it's got to be highlighted to do this. I can either highlight the numeral over here, the quantity, and I'm using my arrow up and down tool to increase it. You can see it going 69, 74, etc. Where I can just kind of visualize it, nudging it one little thing at a time. Okay, and let's say I want the ampersand here to be closer. I could do a couple things. I could just highlight this space, and I could make that smaller right there. Might be one way to do it. Actually, I could make it the point size of that. Let's try the tracking instead. I'm gonna highlight just this and that. Oh, I just want to get the space itself. There we go, the space and the ampersand, and now I'm going to use the tracking tool over here. And I'm just going to go -5. You see it move very slowly. It's going so incrementally. I'm using now my directional tool, my down arrow, to go smaller, bigger. And you can see it over here, -105 units, etc. Let's say I want that to be italics. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to say Trajan Pro. I want it to be regular, and I want it to be, does it give me italics? Okay, Trajan doesn't have italics, unfortunately. That would have been nice. All right. And if I want to change the color, if I could simply highlight those words, go to my color swatches down here, the foreground color. I could sample a color that's on my cover. There's some of that wood over there. Let's say I wanted that. And there, that's, I don't know, it's not very contrasting. Let me sample a different color. I'm going to go back to here. I'm going to lighten it up. Maybe find something a little bit more goldish. Yeah, let me try that. Say okay. And yeah, that contrasts even more. If you want a little bit of a drop shadow behind it, you go to Layer, Layer Style. You have to have that layer selected. And then you go to Drop Shadow. There's other things. There's Bevel and Emboss. And you can see it kind of, see how that looks like it's kind of ornate and made out of brass or something. You can adjust those to the depth of it. You want it to look more up and down, or not quite so much. If I want that and a drop shadow, I can go to Layer, Layer Style, Drop Shadow. Play with these tools, experiment with them. Don't overdo it where it looks kind of ugly. This has a blue drop shadow. I'm going to go to black. Okay, and you can see it popping out already there. If I want to adjust to make the distance not quite so heavy. Anyway, you get the idea, and it's looking very 3D and kind of brassy-like. I don't necessarily love that, but I think that's enough information to get you to play with the tool. Remember that character palette is really important. Your layers palette, you've got to select which text block you're working. You will want some text of your synopsis on the back as well, your author name, publisher, etc. So, yeah, become familiar with these tools and kind of fluid with it. Another thing you can do, if you hold down Shift as you move something, notice how this is going straight up and down. I could just kind of play with it. I'm holding Shift. If I don't hold Shift, it's going to kind of just warble over here. But when I hold Shift, it's going to lock it into its original coordinates. And then I could decide where do I want to have that. All right, end of that lesson. Thank you.